February 24, 1946, Grandview Heights, Ohio, Franklin County. Lola Celli was a 24-year-old teacher who was looking forward to a 3-day holiday. She decided to surprise her family in Grandview Heights with a visit. She arrived at their home, an hour from where she lived in Logan County, with her suitcase in hand. Being so close to Columbus, she decided a shopping trip to the big city was in order. So Sunday morning, Lola bid her family farewell and headed down the street toward the bus stop. But minutes later, the bus pulled away without Lola, because somewhere during that short walk in broad daylight, Lola seemingly vanished from the face of the earth. It was a case that stayed in the public eye for years after it happened, with people debating whether she walked away from her life or was the victim of foul play. More than 75 years later, people are still asking, where is Lola Celli? Lola was born in a village in southern Italy to Michael and Ida Celli. The family immigrated to the United States when Lola was 9 years old and her brother Felice was 7. In America, they added another sister, Elba. Lola adored her siblings. She grew into a pretty young woman, 5'4", 115 pounds, with black hair, brown eyes, and a sweet smile. She did well in America. She graduated near the top of her class at Grandview Heights High School in a Columbus suburb and collected a degree from Ohio State University, where she was an honors student. She could speak 5 languages, and she was active in the Spanish Club, the French Club, and the Education Council. In the fall of 1945, weeks after World War II had come to an end, Lola started her first teaching job, home economics and biology, at West Mansfield High School in the village of West Mansfield in Logan County. Her real goal was to someday become a language interpreter, maybe working for an airline or a government job that would take her on an overseas adventure. But her parents convinced her to try teaching for a year, and she did, intending to return to OSU during her summer break to begin a master's program in Romance languages. If the local newspaper is any indication, she jumped into her job with both feet. In her first few months with the district, one story mentioned how she had given a talk to the PTA on the subject of home and school, and another article had the West Mansfield School District saying it was fortunate to hire her and that they were looking forward to her students offering a style show as soon as they finished the new garments they were working on in sewing class. But Lola would never get to finish her first year of teaching. February the 23rd was a Saturday, part of a long weekend because the schools would be closed Monday for President's Day. Lola took a bus for the hour-long drive to her parents' home in Grandview Heights. The young woman had a playful side. After she arrived at 5 p.m., she was greeted by her mom and 15-year-old Elda. Later that evening, when her father and brother arrived, Lola heard them coming up the path outside. She tucked her suitcase behind the archway in the dining room, then hid herself. But brother Felice opened the door, spotted a corner of the luggage, and the jig was up. As he told Lola he couldn't be fooled, she revealed herself and gave him a big hug. The family spent the evening talking, laughing, and catching up. Lola told them all about her new job and her new roommate. She sat at the piano and played some of her father's favorite Italian songs. Morning came, and while sharing a cup of coffee with her mom, Lola explained her plans to go to a downtown Columbus store to open a charge account. Nylon hoses were still being rationed by department stores in the months after World War II ended, and she needed the charge account to get her name on a hosiery list. So while her mom mopped the floor, Lola went upstairs to get dressed. Her mom asked why she put on an old skirt when she had nicer ones. Lola said she only had the one errand to run, and she'd be quick about it. Besides, her winter coat would hide most of it. At 10:30 a.m., she threw a cheery goodbye over her shoulder at her mother, promising she'd be home long before dinner. Then she stepped outside the small white frame house of her family home on West 3rd Avenue. She was wearing a gray Indian lamb fur coat, a gray hat, an aqua colored dress with red trim, and red suede slip on shoes. She had $60 in her purse. Lola's destination was the bus stop on Cambridge Boulevard. It was just 3.5 blocks away. A neighbor of the Cellis, Harry Lane, saw Lola through his front window as she walked down 3rd. He was putting on his own coat because he had errands in Columbus. When he stepped out onto the sidewalk, he could see her a couple of blocks ahead of him. He figured he'd catch up to her at the stop and they could exchange small talk on the bus. But when Harry got to the stop, Lola wasn't there. The bus driver hadn't seen her either. Back home, as morning turned into early afternoon, Mrs. Celli wondered where her daughter was. Maybe she'd run into a friend and lingered longer than expected. When mid-afternoon came and went, Mrs. Celli convinced herself Lola had probably gone to a movie or decided to spend the entire $60 she carried with her. That would have been odd because her daughter was very frugal, but what the heck? She was a young woman with a new job and a steady paycheck, Mrs. Celli told herself. By 5 o'clock, when Lola wasn't back for dinner, Mrs. Celli knew something was wrong. By the time her husband arrived home at 5:30, Mrs. Celli was nearly in tears. Mr. Celli insisted there must be some kind of explanation, and Lola would share it when she got home. But by 9 o'clock, they stopped making excuses and called the police. The Grandview Heights Police Department wasted no time taking her disappearance seriously. They notified other area departments to be on the lookout for her. They placed her image on the news wires, and over the next couple of days, Lola's picture ran in newspapers all over the country. The case taxed the tiny Grandview Police Department to the max. The town had just 4 police officers who were working day and night. Village officials pitched in. City Auditor W.J. Grubbs took charge of answering phones so officers could be out on the streets helping with the investigation. Soon a posse of high school boys joined the hunt. The week after Lola went missing, 175 seniors from Grandview and Upper Arlington were dismissed from classes at noon on a school day to comb stone quarries, the Scioto Riverbank, and open fields. All they turned up were a pair of women's handkerchiefs, with no way of knowing if they even belonged to Lola. Pauline Liebarger, a fellow teacher of Lola's at West Mansfield, told police the only man Lola ever mentioned to her was a young Dr. Melfi. Detectives followed up. Anthony Melfi was 24 years old and a close childhood friend. Lola had learned that first evening home that he was in a Columbus hospital suffering complications from a long bout with influenza. Melfi died within 24 hours of Lola's disappearance. Police now were prepared to offer up a very popular theory when someone disappeared in the 1950s and 60s, that Lola was either suffering from amnesia or had some sort of nervous breakdown. Police interviewed staff and students at West Mansfield High School and came away with the impression that Lola was nervous and worried about her teaching duties, and her disappearance might be related to that. This did not sit well with her family. Lola's brother, Felice, said hogwash. He was a research chemical engineer at OSU. He said his sister was in excellent physical and mental health. She didn't drink alcohol or smoke and wasn't even dating anyone at the time she disappeared. She had a solid, stable life. She once told someone, "When people first see me, they think I'm a flirt. But after they know me, they realize that I like to stay home and sew or read. Strangely, a couple of years later, the Chellis and the police will reverse their theories about what happened in the block before the Cambridge Avenue bus stop. The family will promote the idea that Lola either suffered from amnesia or walked away from her life. And police will support the theory that she was always the victim of foul play. One thing that caused police to change their minds were the handful of people who were witness to something very strange the morning Lola vanished. A man named Cecil Scott told police that he saw a man and woman arguing in a car along Olentangy River Road. He was following the car, and at one point, the woman kicked her feet and a red shoe fell from the vehicle. He described the car as a red Dodge coupe with a broken window. He said he stopped to look for the shoe but couldn't find it. Police also came up empty handed after they searched the area. But media reports of that account brought out other witnesses. Another woman and a man, an Air Force captain, both described seeing the same scene, a red Dodge coupe on Olentangy River Road with a man and a woman tussling inside. The Air Force captain said at one point the driver appeared to strike the girl with such force that she fell to the side and her foot shot through the open window, displaying a red shoe. The car turned east on Morse Road and disappeared. The captain said he couldn't follow the car, but he did write the license number down on a book of matches. Unfortunately, he couldn't find the book of matches. He said he did remember some of the letters and numbers, so police went to work trying to match licenses to a red Dodge coupe that would have been in the area. They couldn't find one. Another witness worked at a filling station on North High Street, a mile from Olentangy River Road. The attendant said on the day Lola disappeared, a man driving a red coupe with a broken window had stopped for gas. The attendant said a woman was with him, and he heard him to tell the woman to be quiet. He also seemed to be in a big hurry. He bought $2 worth of gas, handed the attendant a $5 bill, then drove off without waiting for his change. Two Italian American organizations offered rewards for information, and phone calls started coming in. On one tip, authorities dragged Twin Lakes in Delaware County. As the weeks passed, tips came in that kept up hope that Lola might still be alive. Two different people in Ironton, Ohio, called police to say they thought they'd seen her. Mrs. Marshall Ankrum said she saw her at the Ironton city limits on February the 27th. And Carl Hughes, a foreman at the Ironton Stove Repair Company, said he saw her in a restaurant in the company of a man who was about 35 years old. In July, Fred Eigel, the caretaker of the Mount Calvary Cemetery in Columbus, called authorities to say a woman had telephoned him to declare that Lola was buried near a fence at the cemetery. When she called back with more details, police were ready and traced the call. They found the woman and learned she was a former mental patient. When the cemetery story came out, a man who worked in Circleville called the Ohio State Journal to say Lola was living with him. We are living in a small town near Columbus, and she is expecting a baby. I've called the family 2 or 3 times about it, he said. The family denied hearing from anyone who had told them Lola was pregnant. The police had to follow so many theories, whether legitimate or crazy. They looked into rumors that the young woman had been committed to a convent by her straight-laced Italian parents. Police Chief Livingston reported publicly that beyond a doubt, Lola had not been compelled by her parents to enter a nunnery. A California woman who had been a neighbor of the Chellis reported that her husband and 4-year-old son had gone missing a few days after Lola was last seen. Was Lola his secret lover? There was no evidence of such. Pickaway County Sheriff Charles Radcliffe got a tip about a pregnant bride that might be Lola. The sheriff collected Lola's brother, Felice, and took him to the bride's house to have a look. The sheriff said for a few seconds the brother thought he might have found his lost sister. That's how much she looked like Lola. But it wasn't her. Lola's disappearance and the roller coaster of emotions that came with each new tip had taken an incredible toll on the family. Lola's siblings, Elda and Felice, talked their mother into taking a job. They helped Ida Celli find work with a garment maker, hoping it would stop her from sitting at home all day weeping. Years passed, and then a moment when everyone held their collective breath. In May of 1949, a ditch digger working in a field off Olentangy River Road near Grandview had turned up a body. Surely this was it. The field had been a dumping ground for North Columbus, and the area was filled in a short time after Lola disappeared. The bones were taken to University Hospital for examination, but the suspense was short lived. Very quickly, Coroner Robert Evans said even though he couldn't determine the gender of the bones, they belonged to someone who was at least 50 years old and had been in the ground for at least 20 years. In 1955, 9 years after her disappearance, another tense moment. Sheriff Harold Bidwell of Madison County received word that someone had illegally dug a grave and buried a body in a coffin at the church cemetery in Canaan Township, southeast of Plain City. At the request of prosecutor Forrest Siderer Jr., the area was dug up and they found a wood coffin. Alas, the body turned out to belong to a man, not a woman. And not for the first time, the search for Lola turned up a completely different mystery that had to be solved. In January of 1955, Michael Celli died not knowing his daughter's fate. During his services at the Our Lady of Victory Church, family kept glancing toward the door, wondering if Lola would come home for his funeral. She didn't. It was the year after that, in 1956, that Grandview Heights Chief of Police Livingston said he was closing the Lola Celli case because he had convincing evidence that she was alive and not a victim of a criminal matter. Chief Livingston said he'd heard from John Guy, the marshal of the neighboring town of Marble Cliff. According to the chief, Guy refused to reveal her whereabouts because he was sworn to secrecy. And Livingston told reporters that was good enough for him. I've known John Guy for 50 years and am willing to accept his word, Livingston told the press. He said he had no reason to press Guy for details since there was no evidence of a crime. This came as a complete surprise to the Celli family. They said the Grandview Heights police chief hadn't talked to them since August of 1946. That was 6 months after Lola's disappearance. Lola's brother, Felice, said authorities had a moral obligation to tell the family where she was so they could see for themselves. But the mayor of Grandview, A.K. Pierce, backed up his police chief and said the case was officially closed. During this time, the marshal with the critical information, John Guy, couldn't be reached because he was away on vacation. But vacations don't last forever, and when he came back, the press was waiting. And that's when Marshal John Guy said that he had heard things from time to time, but reports of his statement were greatly exaggerated. To my knowledge, I have never seen Lola Celli either before or after she disappeared. More than 75 years later, nobody has. In 1985, Lola's mom died, and the fact that Lola was listed among the survivors in her obituary hinted at the family's hope that even after all those years, she was still alive. In 1992, her brother Felice died after spending years in a coma, the result of a car accident. The last member of Lola's family, Her younger sister, Elda, died in 2013 at the age of 82. If Lola were alive today, she'd be turning 100 this year.
Thank you for watching Ohio Mysteries. If you appreciate the effort, please hit the subscribe button down below if you haven't already. Ohio Mysteries also has a podcast with nearly 300 stories in our catalog. Find those on your favorite podcast app or visit ohiomysteries.com for the entire episode list.